Well, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatics, and thank you for tuning in for another off-season primer. Primer number 3 coming at you guys. And as you can see, to my right, I'm joined by Coach Phil. So you know we're talking Riders today, but Coach, thanks for joining me. How you doing?
I'm good, brother. How you doing?
Oh, we're excited. It's me and Blake have been enjoying the off-season, but it sure hasn't been feeling like it with the amount of news that's been coming out, especially in BC with, the Vernon Adams trade, new coach in and out.
Yep.
But it's been fun kind of to, be in the off season. So it's not as, kind of everyday grind and kind of getting ready for week to week. But, I'm kind of enjoying myself. But as I hit you up, wanted to kind of get, Rider Nation, Riderville, I guess, a little prepared for those fans out there kind of wanting, some off season kind of, content, if you will, and kind of getting prepared for it. I was talking with Blake earlier. BC's been busy, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, Saskatchewan been a little bit more quieter, but just a little bit more of a look into free agency and kind of a direction moving forward now after first year under Coach Mace. I think that's probably where we should start, and I think overall pretty positive year under Coach Mace. Some adversity that I think was being able to learn from that adversity mid-season there and come out on the other side better team from it. I think is a huge kind of Coach Mace imprint on. But what were your thoughts on this Coach Mace's overall first season at the helm?
I loved it. I loved it was week to week. Every week was a learning experience for him, I feel. There was a lot of consistency even in the losses. There was places where you knew you're not going to win every game, but you're still going to grow as a team. You have to go through the doldrum at certain times. Coach Mace did a great job anchoring that defense. Coach Mace did a great job handling the QB situation. Even when Trevor got hurt, Shea Patterson came in there. Even there were games where we should have. The Montreal games were ones where we should have won them, and Shea did his thing. Handled the injuries very, very well. He was very stoic. I felt like he should have won Coach of the Year. Uh, for a first year to get to the West Final in your very first year says a whole lot, and there's room for growth, obviously. So let's just see what Coach Mace has in store for us for season two.
Yeah, and to be take it all the way to the last week of the regular season to fight for the first place in the West Division, I think shows a huge growth for the Saskatchewan last 2 years, not making the playoffs, the whole situation after Labor Day. As I mentioned, the adversity that they found kind of mid-season there, whatever it was, 7 or 8 games they went winless. I know there was a tie in there to really not blink and to, as you said, to deal with the injuries that were kind of dealt to them at that time was pretty incredible that they had still, control of their own, destiny was still in front of them to host a West Final in Saskatchewan. I'm curious now moving forward how much do you think that organization now is able to, they can stand on, stable ground and that foundation has already kind of been set here moving forward and they kind of know the standards now. Most of those leaders should be back. I know there's a few guys, especially on defense, that need to be brought back. But I would think with that winning culture that Coach Mace has brought, there's going to be no problem in bringing some of those guys back. But how do you see this team kind of moving forward now after such a good, start to the regime?
One thing I'll say about Coach Mace that I've learned about him is his message hasn't changed. The team bought in. Usually, year one, everybody's kumbaya, come together, and then when they went through the adversity together, losing all those games, teams will fall apart. They were lucky enough to be able to have his message of build it, you build it, you build it, you build it. 1-0, 0-0, 0-0, 1-0, 1-0. He kept that same message, and that's something that a lot of people they don't. You think, oh, it's just a rallying cry. No, it's the standard, as you mentioned. He's done that, and his staff has bought in. The players have bought in. The guys will want to come back. Just gotten Trevor. I know we're going to talk about that, but getting Trevor back is going to be a key thing for us. Especially that defense too. Got to get some of them guys on defense re-signed because that's his bread and butter. But I like where the standard is a standard, and they're going to keep growing as a team.
I know it's still, June still, whatever it is, 6, 7 months away. The team's going to be looking a lot different with free agents that will be signed, incoming new players into the CFL, etc. But from an early standpoint, maybe it's a way too early kind of projection. From me personally, coach, I think it's kind of Saskatchewan's almost Western vision to lose in a sense. I think BC, there's some question marks there with obviously Buck Pierce being a first time head coach, still needing to prove himself. Nathan Rourke still needing to prove that he can get back to his standard. You look at Edmonton, obviously there's some positivity, but Trey Ford's kind of similar where he needs to kind of prove that he's the guy Mark Killen being a first-time head coach as well. Calgary still kind of needing to prove themselves, getting out of the last place in the West Division. You look at Winnipeg now. Obviously, Winnipeg's been the standard, 5 straight Grey Cups. I'm sure you know the resume by now. Is it maybe time for them to take a step back? Where I look at Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan is kind of, currently the only team that's kind of on an upward trajectory right now, where they have kind of, O'Day in place, Mace, and then, at quarterback, Trevor Harris, obviously. What do you think about that? Do you think kind of it's Saskatchewan's division? Obviously, it's, things will happen, trades will happen, free agents will sign, all that sort of stuff. So, this could be obviously a conversation that we have a little bit closer to June. But what do you think about that as now, coach?
Um, I'm a realist. I mean, Winnipeg won the division, so it's their division right now. Uh, we're not at a place yet where I can say it's ours because Winnipeg won it. Winnipeg went to the Grey Cup, unfortunately lost, but you can't count them out. Edmonton's on the rise. Calgary just got Vernon Adams Jr. BC is still a team you got to look out for. So it's a toss up right now. Until somebody knocks out Winnipeg, you can't sit there and say, "Oh, it's your division to lose." But are we in the conversation? Hell yeah, everybody's in the conversation. You just got to go do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. So let's get into the news that finally Saskatchewan kind of made some, or was in the news, signing Trevor Harris back to a 1-year deal. It was talked about, I believe, after they beat BC that, he was going to kind of have a conversation in the offseason with, his family and whatnot to decide if he wanted to keep playing. And he admitted after he signed with Saskatchewan that it was a pretty quick conversation that after, I believe, his family were fully on board with him coming back, that he wanted to sign with Saskatchewan. What were just your thoughts when you saw the news, coach, and of Trevor Harris coming back?
I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised in size bit. He even when without him getting injured, he still balled and still had a really good season. He earned that contract. He's a safe pick. He's a very safe pick to have at quarterback. He's a guy that he's not. As long as he takes care of the ball, you have a chance. You have a fighting chance to win games. Trevor's kept us in some games. He's cut down on the mistakes a lot. Even in the West Final, I was very impressed. I was very impressed seeing that he didn't turn the ball over so much. So that proved to me, hey, he got us here. He can get us over the hump. We've got the pieces around him. It's just putting it all together. The the thing I hate most about I kind of, I won't say hate, but I dislike is the job as quarterback is kind of a double-edged sword. At times, you get all the praise, but you get all the flack. With Trevor, he's even killed. He's calm about everything. He goes into battle and does what he's supposed to do. Now, there are times where Trevor does the ball does get away from Trevor, yes, but what quarterback doesn't? I think he's the safe pick for us. We don't have to restart with a whole new quarterback. You don't have to try and tailor the system so much to him. You have to. It's about not just X's and O's, but Joes and Schmoes. So we got the right guy. We're gonna get it done, and this might be the year to get over the hump.
I like that you said, most consistent kind of. Coach Mace, I feel like led team at quarterback. I feel like he wants kind of that guy that he knows that he can depend on. As you said, not really turning the football over, really dependable, high completion percentage. I believe he had the led the league in passing efficiency this year. But I think one thing that's probably an obvious, question coming up. He'll be 39 this upcoming season when the season begins. The injury last season, I believe he had an injury similar. I believe it was a knee injury in 2023. And obviously we saw, in the Grey Cup, Nick Arbuckle having to, step up for Chad Kelly, and how much that backup quarterback position can be so important in, a CFL, in any football league. Um, does that concern you at all, just the injury history and then kind of the backup quarterback position kind of being up in there? I know Shea Patterson's still a free agent. So really kind of still TBD to see who's going to be backing up Trevor.
That's a good question. With any player in football, you got to account for injury, but with quarterbacks, it seems like you got to be well prepared. You got to have a really strong backup. I think that with Trevor, you don't want to think he's going to have injuries. You never know, but having a good backup, it doesn't hurt to have that. I'm okay with Trevor. I'm okay with I'm bought in on him. I'm bought in on Trevor as the starting quarterback. I do account for what happened in the past with his injuries and all that, but it happens. It's football.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious. I know there's been some conversation out there, and just talking about the backup quarterback position. I know Shea Patterson, um, I think there was some good, but there was also some bad in there. So I think that that's probably an option still to bring him back. I know there was conversation out there that was kind of put to bed very quickly by some people that cover the Riders about Cody Fajardo potentially coming back as a backup quarterback position. But I know a guy that you're kind of a fan of and tend to vouch for often. But a guy like maybe Jake Mayer, who's needs maybe a season or two to kind of reset, learn from a guy like Trevor Harris. And no, well, I'm kind of actually being serious. I feel like he'd be a perfect
Yes,
like you don't have to start right for the next few years. Although Trevor's getting up there, I feel like if they were to go on a run next year and at least get to the West Final again, he probably buys himself another year, especially if he plays well, right? Like it's not like they're going to be forcing him out of Saskatchewan. Where
right.
if you're Jake, why not? There's all the starting positions are taken. So I'm kind of trying to look for what's the best possible situation for you. You're kind of a similar type quarterback to Trevor Harris. Corey
Mm-hmm.
Mace is a guy that I feel like you can kind of maybe lean on, and a guy that you can maybe try to resurrect your career in a sense. Because if you look at Jake Mayer, I believe he's still relatively young in a sense. I
Yes,
think he's under 30 years old, so you can kind of afford to maybe go back up for a year or two if Trevor was to go down. If you're able to keep the team afloat, I think that just proves that much more that you need to maybe get looked at as a starting quarterback down the road eventually. But what do you think about that, and just as an option as potentially bringing him in?
cousin Jake. Um, it all depends on the offense. Your offense, first of all, your offense. Are you trying to put 40, 50 points on the board, or are you just trying to win the game? There's a lot of quarterbacks out there that he can throw for a quarterback can throw for 400, 500 yards, and their team's not in the playoffs. You could throw for 5,000 and be in the MLP conversation and still not be successful. You want a guy, if your goal is to win the Grey Cup, you need a quarterback, even a backup quarterback that's going to be able to come in with not the same expectations, but get the job done in relief and get the job done for you. I like cousin Jake. Uh, I think that would be a great spot for him to go to, even but learn. We try to throw these guys out here in the fire and get them beat up and tore up, but sometimes with guy that has played, he needs a little more seasoning. Needs a little more maturing to do, and not saying Jay needs maturing, but just growth within his game. Learn from Trevor. If something does happen to Trevor, we got Jake. Keep the game plan simple for him, where you call certain things for him where it works to his benefit, and you're good to go. So Jake in the green, I'm here for it.
I think where they're kind of a little bit similar, coach writers, they're a little bit more conservative quarterbacks where they like to take
Mhm.
what's available underneath. But I think where Jake could learn from is like Trevor actually will take those shots downfield if available, right? Where Jake, I
They're
think
calculated.
Jake
They're very
Jake doesn't.
calculated chances.
Yeah, Jake doesn't really necessarily. He does do that, obviously, as any pro quarterback will. But I feel like that's maybe one of his weaknesses is the inability to stretch the ball downfield sometimes when it's there. And I think learning from a guy like Trevor Harris, who kind of balances that sweet spot really nicely, I think, of being conservative, having a high completion percentage, but by no means is he a check down Charlie, if you will. Of he'll take the shot if it's there, especially with some of those receivers that are in Saskatchewan. But coach, my last question talking about the quarterback, and I think I'm probably going to know your answer, but I'm curious to ask just because I know how much of a fan you are of him. The obviously how I feel about him, but it was reported that Jeremy O'Day didn't kick the tires on any sort of Vernon Adams trade or anything like that. Do you kind of like that because of how much you're bought in and that organization is bought in on Trevor Harris, or would you like to maybe see them take a swing at a guy like Vernon Adams?
You know, as a coach, I've learned once you have magic, you let it out the bottle, you can't get it back. You got to stay consistent with what you got. I love Vernon. I love Vernon, but we got a good thing here, and let's make sure we hone it and we develop. That's been something that I've been a tip that I've been on pause for the past week or so is developing our players and help and growing as a team. Uh, it's right there. It would have been nice to have Vernon, but I kind of like what we have here. Let's keep it.
Hmm.
Let's keep the group together and not make us. You don't always have to make a splash. You don't always have to go get the most, I guess, not provocative, but that superstar. Teams win championships, not just superstars. So I like what we got right here. Let's keep the band together, and let's just develop and grow as a unit. That's how you see like teams like Winnipeg. They they've kept the band together for a long time, and it's just that simple. Keep the team together.
For sure. And I think that would have played a part in we'll talk about it now. Transition into free agents. If you sign a guy like Vernon Adams, where Trevor's probably it'll be a little bit cheaper. I know that the number's not out there quite yet, but that probably limits you even more to, retaining some of your guys on defense, like maybe Jameer Thurman, some of those guys on the defensive line, some of the guys in the secondary that I know are up for a contract. So, Coach, as I mentioned, talk about some upcoming free agents on behalf of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I'm not too sure if you have the list at all in front of you. I
I
do
got it
have it
right
up
here.
here in the browser, so we can go over a few names I think are some key guys that probably you'd like to have back. And as I mentioned earlier, I think having that winning culture now with Coach Mace, I think will be um, much easier to bring these guys back, opposed to if you maybe miss the playoffs or not. But Mario Alford, Malik Carney, some of the guys on the defensive line, Miles Brown, Brian Cox in the secondary, Bola Cumbo, Marcus Sales, Jameer Thurman, as I mentioned at linebacker. More of a emphasis on the defensive side of the ball. On offense, Trevor's obviously coming back. AJ's under contract. The receivers are mostly under contract. Looking at your current free agents, if you kind of can remember them, if you don't have the list over there, Coach,
I got
who
the
are maybe
list right
some of the
here.
guys that you'd like to maybe see back in the green and white?
Well, defensively, I'd like to see Brian Cox and Malik Carney back. Obviously, you need your linebacker with Jameer Thurman. Also, you got AJ Allen. I'd like to see AJ Allen spend next season with us. He had a great season. Um, DB wise, Nelson Lacombo. I want to see us keep Onyeka, and I want to see us keep Marcus Sales. Marcus Sales would get under my skin a whole bunch because it's sometimes Marcus is a gambler. Marcus, as you know, with him at BC, he's a gambler. He gonna take chances. Sometimes it looks like Marcus is lost in the sauce out there, but damn it, he makes plays. So those are some of the guys on defense I think we need to keep. Sales, Lacombo, Onyeka. I like Onyeka, Jameer Thurman, AJ Allen. Malik Carney, obviously. We just signed Charbel DeBeer. Micah needs to be re-signed. Brian Cox. I really like Brian Cox Jr.
Hmm.
And maybe it's because I'm familiar with who his father is, but he plays very similar. He's hard hitting, get your nose dirty type of player.
Lunch
Uh,
pail for sure.
Lunch
Yeah,
pit. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Now offensively, Jarrett Stearns popped off
yeah,
this season. Get him. Picton is really good. I like him. Rock Armstead, please re-sign him.
yeah.
It changes up the tempo a little bit as far as you know what you're getting with AJ, but if AJ goes down, you have a running back who can still go out there. He broke off for 200 his first game with the Riders, but those games are every blue moon. I'm realistic. I don't expect him to go for 200 or 150 every doggone game. But if he can get us between 90 and 110, money all day. And then we re-signed Trevor. So those are some people I'm digging right now. We need to get them back in the green.
And obviously the offensive line, there's some
Yeah.
guys, some question marks there, but I think you could probably more so look at maybe wanting to maybe bring some guys in that are potentially outside and re-sign, some of your guys. I believe Logan Ferlin is probably a guy that's, a nice foundational piece at center. Also has that flexibility to, slide outside and play tackle, but a guy that you can kind of build around now in the trenches there on the offensive line. But more of a defensive heavy kind of free agent class for you guys here upcoming in this here in February. But coach, what are maybe some, looking outside of your free agents that you want to re-sign? What are maybe some position of needs and maybe some you don't have to maybe name any players because if you don't have the list in front of you, it's all good. But some positions that you maybe like to upgrade from outside of the organization, whether it's maybe offensive line like we just mentioned, defensive line and bringing some guys in. It could be in the secondary, whatnot. But who are maybe or what positions specifically, if any, come off the top of your mind?
We talked about it all season on the show. I'm big on the trenches. We got to get some strength in those on the guard position. When Yoshi comes back, he's going to be a stout. I was thinking maybe I know it was a long shot, but I would have loved to have seen Stanley Bryant, but
Yeah.
that was wishful thinking. But in between those guards, we got to get some help at the guard position. That's just me. I think that we moved. We had so many injuries. Guys were moving around. At one point, we had Micah step in and play on
Yeah.
the line. I was at that game. It was like what? But I think we you win championships in the trenches. Sure up that D line. I love what Coach Daniels is doing. Coach Philip Daniels is doing. Uh, we got to win the trenches. We could have all the skill positions, but if Trevor doesn't have time in the pocket, it's not. It means nothing.
I think that's probably likely, the pathway I could see Saskatchewan is, obviously wanting to retain some of those guys on defense, but really attacking free agency and maybe potentially the upcoming CFL draft with wanting to upgrade that offensive line. As I mentioned, Trevor Harris coming back, AJ Ouellette's coming back, KSB, Emulus, Keyshawn Johnson's, I believe, under
Mhm.
contract as well. Um, receivers, Dale Duncan Busby, obviously younger guy under contract. So as you mentioned, I think probably Stearns is Stearns and maybe Armstead are some of the guys that you'd like to probably re-sign. But offensive line and being able to attack that, I think in free agency is probably pretty cool for you guys, especially with Coach Mason being able to recruit that way. But talking about the defensive side, there's kind of a key free agent almost at every level of the defense. At defensive line, there's multiple names at linebacker. Jameer Thurman's obviously the big name, but also the depth that there's, AJ Allen, as you mentioned. I believe both Herb and Reed brothers are free agents. So
Mhm.
some of those guys that are versatile guys where they can step into the lineup, give you some valuable snaps, but also play, key roles on special teams as well. In the secondary, there's multiple guys, as you mentioned, Nelson Lacumbo, Marcus Sales, some other guys. If you were to, because obviously, as both you and I are aware, it's kind of the business of the CFL. Sometimes you're not able to re-sign everybody. If you were to maybe, give a list where you think is pretty one, two, or three in priority, where you want to, maybe re-sign some of the guys in the secondary first, linebacker second, and defensive line third, how would you maybe rearrange or arrange your list?
Get re-sign the guys inside the box first. That's number one priority. Everything in football is in between those lines, right? In between the lines is in that box. If you can't set your front seven or front eight guys, we have nothing to talk about. Then you go do your secondary. This team reminds me so much of the Legion of Boom. And people obviously think of the Legion of Boom, they think of Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas. But what made us successful, and me and someone from Seattle that knew the ins and outs of the Hawks, it was the depth that we had. We were so deep at DB that it was disgusting. And our front line, in between those two tackles, those two defensive tackles, you had Red Bryant, you had McDonald. They were able to get to the quarterback. You got to have guys like that. This team is very similar to that. All you got to do is just, you got to spend a little money, man. Spend a little money.
At
Keep
least you
everybody,
ain't
keep that band together.
At least he ain't cheap like Calgary, but we'll save that conversation for another day. Um, let's kind of talk about the defense here moving forward, Coach. And obviously, there's big names like Roland Milligan to kind of build off Coach Mace as head coach, defensive coordinator. But I believe CJ Rivas coming back, as you mentioned, Charbel DeBeer coming back, Demarcus Fields, I think is another one. So some names to build around there in the defense, and coming off such a strong year, I would imagine they're going to be very motivated to repeat or get close to the kind of the bar they set last or this past year. How excited are you to kind of see that group in year two under Coach Mason and Roland Milligan kind of start to really have a almost into that next gear as a player in the CFL now, obviously with the most outstanding defensive player of the year.
I'm very excited to see them take the next step. Now, every defense, we were one of the top defenses. If you want to be in that upper echelon of them dudes, you got to grow. And where I think our weakness was, at times we sacrificed the run a little too much. I think some teams had a little too much fun running the ball on us. We got to sure up things. We were dominant pass wise, but in the West Final, we got exposed a little bit. You got to get some help. There were people that were talking about, oh, why didn't we move Roland over there on Kenny Lawler and move Henderson out of the way? No, it's not that simple. You got to move as a unit, and that's what they're willing to. That's what they're going to do. So I'm very excited to see this defense grow. I'm excited to see them develop. You got to keep developing your depth as well, and it should be a fun year for this defense, man. I think this defense is going to carry us further, and we might be able to take that next step to win a Grey Cup.
Offensively, as I was saying there, for the five receivers, could bring back Stearns, could have bringing the band back together. Trevor Harris at quarterback once again. AJ's going to be in the backfield. What are you kind of your thoughts here early on? Obviously, it's we're talking on December 7th here, so the team's going to look pretty different come June with free agency, the draft. You obviously had finds in the draft last year with Del Duck and Busby, a Jew. So there's pathways to finding players that can contribute for you, even as far as into May and stuff like that. We saw it last year in BC with the signing of Christian Covington, around I believe May or something like that. So guys that are maybe cut in the NFL or don't have opportunities or coming to the CFL late. So there will be additions that'll be had going into the season as well. Early on, early look, I guess, at the Riders' offense here with some of the pieces being brought back. Are you excited that I know Trevor also mentioned this at his press conference after he signed. This will be the first time he's had the same offensive scheme since I think it was like 2018. He said or something like that. That he's going to be able to going into next year. It won't be learning offensive 300. It'll be offensive 301 and 302 kind of being more advanced going into the season. So are you excited about this group kind of going forward in year two? I guess.
Oh yeah, I'm very excited to see this. I think that watching them majority of the season, there were times where we did stall out as an offense. We kind of got a little stagnant. We were trying to figure out whether we were going to air it out or we were going to dominate with the run, but we couldn't really dominate with the run like we wanted to. With AJ being out, Rock came a little later in the season, like really like late in the season from Ottawa. But I, my only gripe that I had with the offense, who's going to step up? Who's going to be the number one guy, the number one receiver? We have a lot of complimentary guys, but they all this season, it just seemed like they all were here. Nobody leaped up and was like, "Hey, I'm that dude. I'm that guy." But there were moments when Sean Bain Jr. went down. It was Sam. Then it was Keyshawn. Then it was Aju, and then it was different guys, and injuries got involved. So who's going to be the number one guy when we got on him to go be our Kenny Lawler? Who's going to be our Reggie Biggleton? Who's going to be our Geno Lewis? Who's going to be the definitive when the chips are down? We go to him.
So, coach, like I was saying there early on, it was a little bit of a quieter kind of start to the offseason compared to, I guess, the fellow, BC and Edmonton and Alberta teams. Um, I'm gonna maybe put you on the spot here because I didn't throw this into giving you a little bit of time to prepare. But is there any sort of maybe hot take early on in the offseason here that you want to maybe throw out there? It doesn't have to be Saskatchewan. It could be me. I know you were talking about number one receivers, but there is currently Geno Lewis out there. Maybe you think he ends up in Calgary with former teammate Vern Adams Jr. William Stanback's available. Obviously McInnes. We were talking with earlier on Mark Steven, obviously voice of the Calgary Stampeders, and he was pretty, wanting to get his hands on Justin McInnes there in Calgary. Is there any maybe hot takes that come to mind, Coach? Maybe free agency, maybe somebody signing somewhere that maybe you don't see, or there's Cody Fajardo available, obviously Jake Mayer. Anything that comes to mind, Coach?
Mm.
Could be Saskatchewan related as well, if you feel like it.
I like what we got right here. I like what we got. I could see Gino going to Calgary.
I agree.
I think that would be a net. They're one receiver away, but they got to get that offensive line right. Just like us, we got to get our line right, but they got to get their line together. But they're one receiver away from destroying everything. But I could see Gino going to Calgary. I could see Kenny Lawler is a free agent, I think, too.
Yes, I believe he is. Yeah.
I could see Kenny coming to Sask.
Wouldn't that be some? Wouldn't that
That
shake
would
up the West? Wouldn't
that
that shake up the West?
that would
For
be
me,
that would be
Coach,
yeah.
for me, coach, it's William Stanback. I think that's Dedrick Mills, Peyton Logan are free agents there in Calgary. VA was a big part of bringing him over to BC. Teammates in Montreal. I'm really keeping my eyes out on kind of William Stanback and maybe him potentially going to Calgary because I think that would be a very big piece with Vernon Adams. Where I think Calgary's more known to be a little bit more quieter in free agency. So I don't know if Gino Lewis is quite the splash, although I would love it for them because I think pairing him with Reggie Bagleton, it's like, man, you got the
And Marcus,
monsters out
yeah.
you got the monsters out there at receiver that it's like, man, pick your poison. And but I like Calgary's chances if they were to have that 1-2 punch. But I feel like a guy like William Stanback is a little bit more of a kind of a not as much as Gina Lewis out there, with the the Sellies and stuff like that. I think a guy like William Stanback could be perfect for a fit like Calgary. But I think free agency is still a little bit of a ways away. So maybe we'll have that conversation down the road. Coach, I'm curious. I was kind of I was wanting to talk about with Mark, but unfortunately ran out of time. I don't know if you saw the CFLPA and they announced they're going to be putting out the report cards in about a month's time with kind of the 9 different franchises or whatnot. We had Mark Steven on earlier and talked about the former Stampeders kind of taking some shots at the organization and talking about the lack of investment in the facilities and the players, going to Toronto and having I believe one of the quotes was like, we didn't have to have bagels and cereal when we came to Toronto for breakfast and stuff like that. So I think that's like me personally, I think it's a great thing for the CFL where you can kind of put a little bit of pressure on some of these owners to give first class or like organization fields to some of these guys where they're professionals and they should be treated like such. So what do you think about that kind of coming into the CFL, and are you excited for that to be happening? And I think it's about a month time they're going to release that.
I'm all for it. If you want to take the next step as a league, sometimes you do need to let it be known that, hey, you got to get your stuff together as an organization. Are you here to make money, or are you here to just say, hey, I own a team? That's how I look at it. You got to take care of your players, and I love the CFLPA doing this, man. Call them out, do what you got to do, and take care of your players, man. Take care of these guys, man. They're the ones that's out there sacrificing their bodies day in and day out. If you, hell, I saw what Kadeem Carey said. We was at the Grey Cup when that came out.
Yeah.
It's like it's sometimes it's just some things just need to be said, and he hit it right on the head. He didn't mince words, and sometimes these organizations got to know, man, are you in it to win, or are you in it just to say you got a team? Do it.
Well said, Coach. I just got a text here from Blake. He said he wanted me to ask you a question, Coach, and I think we kind of somewhat gone over this, so feel free to kind of answer this how you will. But he says, what's the next step for the Riders? Is that kind of I feel like maybe a little bit obvious, but obviously Grey Cup probably is the next step, right? Well, a game away from going to the Grey Cup this past season. What are your thoughts and what is the next step for the Riders? Last question, Coach.
Win the West first.
Yeah.
It don't mean you can't get to the Grey Cup if you don't win the West. Uh, you're on the doorstep. You just got to kick in. Pardon my French, but you got to kick that fucking door in. Kick that motherfucker in and go get yours. The window. Everybody has a window. You just got to know when to climb through that motherfucker and go get yours. It's time right now. We're in a time right now where I think Riderville is going to be very, very happy with what they have, and you know how it is. You hear it every year. We've only got 4 Grey Cups in 100 and something years. Let's go get 5. Win
Awesome.
the West, baby.
Win the West. I love it, Coach. Thank you so much for joining us, talking a little bit of Riders, Coach. As always, let the people know where they can find you and when you're going to be back on the saddle again.
All right. Took a nice little 2-3 week break after Grey Cup. That Grey Cup hangover is serious. You can find me on YouTube, Coach Phil Reacts. You can find me on X, Coach Phil Reacts. Find me on my Instagram. That's where I do, and TikTok, Coach Phil 425. Follow me on my Deep in the Game. I have some episodes coming up soon, and I'm off my sabbatical and I'm back to take my crown back.
Awesome. Let's go. If you guys enjoyed today's off-season primer with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, talking Saskatchewan Roughriders with Coach Phil, please like, comment, subscribe. Let us know how you guys are feeling in Riderville down below. And we will catch you guys on the next off-season primer.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.